Perfect Dark is a first-person shooter developed by Rare for the Nintendo 64 and later ported to the Xbox 360. I don't think that statement does the game justice. In my opinion, this is Rare's peak as a game development studio. It also feels like the tipping point between the old guard of shooters and the ones that would come after. Perfect Dark came out a little more than a year before Halo, with just as many, if not more, features than Halo, all while running on an N64. So is it the perfect shooter? Yet almost. The game still has a few issues, though thankfully some of them are now exclusive to the N64. I'll be talking about the emulated version of this game, which if you want to try out, I'll leave a link to in the description. You'll have to find the ROM on your own. One last thing, my recording software hates this game, so you'll just have to take my word for how some things work, because I'm not going to be able to show you. With all that said, let's get started on visuals.
At your age, Joanna.
Technically speaking, this game was really pushing what the N64 could do back in the day. On the original hardware, this meant that you would suffer from low frame rates if things got too busy. Now we can play the game without having to worry about that. So, how does it look? Starting with the levels, there's a lot of variety to be had. There's a lot of indoor maps, but the game's not afraid to open it up every once in a while. There's plenty of detail on display, though a consequence of the game being developed for the N64 means the larger maps are more barren. Not to say there's nothing to see, of course, but this game was already running at 5 frames per second on the original console, so don't go into every level expecting tons of complex geometry. What I find more interesting than the geometry are the colors. There's plenty of reds and greens and blues and everything else in between used, and it helps keep the game look visually interesting. When you're not looking at the environment, you'll be looking at character models. A lot of characters look like they're wearing someone else's face for a mask, but where they really stand out are the animations. Most, if not all, of the animations are done through mocapping, and it helps keep the game from feeling too out of date. These animations can get pretty detailed too, with enemies reacting to where you shoot them. The weapons, unlike GoldenEye, also have reload animations, including an animation where you shunt ammo into a gun. The weapons themselves also look good, with plenty of futuristic and alien designs, although some of them are more interesting to look at than others. The UI also looks good, especially when you beat a mission and it transitions into this blue and purple space background. There are a couple of minor visual issues I had while playing though. First, the level of detail drop-off isn't very far, though this comes with it being an N64 game. The other issue I had are these lines on levels that would appear where the polygons don't fully connect, although I'm pretty sure this is just an emulation issue that I'm not intelligent enough to fix. Overall, aside from a couple of minor issues I had, this game still looks fantastic if you're not too worried about low poly counts. But visuals are only half the battle. How does the game sound? The audio makes up for any shortcomings the graphics might have and adds some real depth to the game. A really big part that stands out for me is the music. Music production was led by Grant Kirkhope, who helped make music for, all of these. And I might be biased, but I think this is some of the best stuff he's ever made. It's bassy, dark, mysterious, with a bit of Blade Runner mixed in there for good measure. As for the sound effects, some of them are borrowed from GoldenEye, seeing as how this is a spiritual successor and all. The sound effects in this game have always sounded cleaner and fuller to me though. Maybe it's just confirmation bias, or I'm finally developing brain rot.
The temperature's dropped. You must be close to the cryo room. I heard noise.
What Perfect Dark does have over GoldenEye is actual voice acting. And yeah, a lot of the combat dialogue is split between 3 dudes and 1 lady, who also happens to voice the lead character. They bring a lot of character to the game though, so to speak.
That's not how it goes.
Yes, it is.
Oh no, it's delayed.
She's here.
The cutscenes with the focused in acting are what really pull through.
But this is a golden opportunity to show that America has faith in its industries and will back them.
Damn it, man. I say no, and I mean no. I'm not going to change my mind on this. I need my advisors to be unbiased, and recently you've not been giving me the impartiality I require. Let it go, and we'll say no more. This is your last chance.
Oh my god, this game predicted Obama. Some of the audio is still compressed sounding, especially the voice acting. But what can you do? This game's almost a quarter century old.
We can intercept any craft they use.
Then the devices we gave you are working correctly. Good, because we believe anything which does not work correctly should be destroyed. Consider that as you follow your backup plans.
Overall, the audio is probably held up better than the graphics have, and the negatives are far outweighed by the positives. So the game's appealing to the senses, but is it appealing to the dopamine receptors? Any comparisons to GoldenEye could be boiled down to, it's GoldenEye but more refined, so I'll just be sticking to what this game does. Seeing as how this is a first-person shooter, you'll be doing a lot of shooting. On the original hardware, the game would compensate for the weird control scheme of the N64 controller by basically pointing the gun at anything that was on screen. On mouse and keyboard, it plays a lot more like you'd expect and generally just feels nicer to play. The actual act of shooting someone is very cathartic. There's a lot of visual and even some auditorial feedback. The AI isn't too shabby either. They're a lot more reactive than you might think. Like if you shoot a gun out of their hand, they might pull out a holdout weapon, they might try to fistfight you, or they might just out and out surrender. Like I said earlier, the voice acting really adds some depth to this.
I'm only doing my job.
The most interesting part of the shooting equation is the weapons themselves. There's a huge variety of weapons in this game, and although a few are redundant, they all serve a purpose. Every weapon has a secondary firing mode, and although most of these are pretty basic, some can enhance your weapon or even change what it does entirely. Like the one that changes your minigun into a power drill. Yeah. All the pistols can be dual wielded too, including the ones that fire explosive bullets. It's not all just mindless shooting though. In each level, there are objectives you have to complete. What difficulty you select will not only increase how hard the AI is, but it will also increase the number of objectives you need to complete. Agent's good for a first time, but I'd really recommend playing on Special Agent or higher if you want to get the most out of this game. Increasing the difficulty will also increase the number of traps and where they're placed. Yeah, traps. Like I said, this game is a mix of old and new, and that means the game's not afraid to open a couple monster closets on you if it thinks it can get you. This part of the game in particular is a nightmare on Perfect Agent. Beating the game will unlock a special level depending on what difficulty you selected. And like older shooters, this game also has cheat codes. Only these cheats need to be unlocked by speedrunning certain levels on certain difficulties in certain times. You can also play through the campaign on cooperative and counter-operative mode. On counter-operative mode, player 1 plays as Joe Dark and player 2 plays as any NPC in the level. Unfortunately, I don't have any footage of this to show you, but I can promise you that more games would benefit from this greatly. Like, imagine Halo, except as player 2 you get to play as one of the grunts, and when you die you play as a different grunt. On top of all that, there's also a multiplayer mode with an insane level of customization, allowing you to pick right down to what the AI bot's behavior will be. There's also challenges that let you unlock stuff in multiplayer, and some of these can be utterly deranged. The multiplayer's still a blast, although I bet you can imagine how well it ran trying to render 4 screens instead of 1 back in the day. Overall, the game still plays extremely well, with plenty of little secrets and details to keep it interesting. Completing objectives helps tie it all down, and it also helps it connect to the overarching narrative.
Grave dangers. They flooded the area with nerve gas.
So the story itself is pretty simple. You play as Agent Joanna Perfect Dark, who has a lot of talent but not a lot of experience. In fact, this is her first real mission. Thankfully, this fact never gets retconned. Your first mission is to rescue a person of interest named Dr. Carroll, who turns out to be an AI. Datadyne, the corporation that built him, want to restructure his personality for some project, which is not made clear yet. So far, this all just seems like your standard corporate espionage. Your boss, Daniel Carrington, is kidnapped, and after rescuing him, he darkly alludes to calling in some friends to deal with Datadyne. Which, spoiler, it's these guys. It's not really that much of a surprise when you consider that aliens are on the front cover of the game. Anyway, you go to Chicago to peel back more layers of the conspiracy, and the NSA are involved, naturally. You still don't know much about this blonde guy in the white overcoat, though. He seems to be the puppet master, though you don't find out more about him till later. Unfortunately, your alien buddies got shot down, where else? Over Area 51, so you have to go in and rescue them. Only one survived, and it's up to you to break him out. I'll save the rest of the story for the spoilers section. So far, the story's pretty engaging, and Elvis might be one of my favorite video game characters.
What's wrong? I have a headache.
I'm also a big fan of the consistencies between the levels, like how items and weapons being tested in early levels show up as standard issue in later levels. Overall, the plot kinda reminds me of Deus Ex, where you discover and try to stop a conspiracy. Although the stakes in this game take a different turn. That's about all I can say without spoiling the rest of the story. If you just want to see the conclusion, go to here. Okay, so when I said the stakes take a different turn, I meant they go galactic. Let me step back a bit. During the conspiracy meeting, Trent Easton, the director of the NSA, reveals a plan to either ask the president to loan him a ship called the Pelagic II, or to simply clone him and replace the old president. We've heard the Pelagic II get brought up a few times. It's a deep-sea exploration vessel, and it could be related to the Project Ark that Carol was supposed to be on. Anyways, you board Air Force One to intercept the president before Easton can get his hands on him. On board, you see some strange things. What is the ship design? Who are these blonde guys, and why do they all look alike? It turns out the blonde guys are holographic disguises for a second race of aliens, called the Skedar. Datadyne are being manipulated by the Skedar, who have them take over the Pelagic II ship. Datadyne's plan is finally revealed after clearing out the Pelagic II. There is a millions-old living starship with a weapon on board that can vaporize Earth. The bizarre thing is, this is only relevant for one mission. You discover what amounts to a sleeping god laying on the ocean floor, blow it up, and then call it a day. I don't know, it's kind of hard to come back from that. Anyways, the Skedar attack the Carrington Institute, that's the building you work at, and it doesn't go very well for them. They do manage to kidnap you and bring you aboard one of their ships. Elvis comes to the rescue and the game becomes a full-blown space war at this point. I kinda dig it. It added some spice to the story that I think it needed. I just wish the game brought back some of that eldritch horror from earlier, you know? The final mission has you fight through the Skedar homeworld to take out their leader in a kind of mediocre boss fight. Once you beat the game though, you're treated to the sickest end credits I've ever seen. Overall, I really like how the story ramps up towards the end, even if I wish we got more of that death and horror from beyond the veil kind of thing. Even so, I think the game wraps itself up very nicely, and invites you to go back through and speedrun some of the levels. The context of the missions help keep the game from getting too boring on replays in my opinion. Perfect Dark is one of those games that was ahead of its time. It was so ahead of its time that it ran like garbage on the original hardware. Now it can be enjoyed for what it is, an arcadey shooter that serves as a transition between two worlds. Perfect Dark would get a sequel on the Xbox 360 called Perfect Dark Zero, which is a game. I'd highly recommend trying out Perfect Dark since it's pretty easy to get it for free these days and emulate it. If you don't want to emulate, your best bet's probably the Xbox 360 version, even if it has some disagreeable changes. Thanks for watching and Happy New Year. Hopefully with 2024 I'll be uploading more, but you know what they say about New Year's resolutions.